Well, hello. I am Radagast, also known as ModWiz 125, although the 125 was just something I had to put on because they wouldn't take ModWiz alone. Anyway, where is it? Where's my mic? No need to broadcast that. So anyway, I'm not going to show my face for long. I'm starting kind of a new series of videos. But being as I have shown my face for most of my YouTube career, which is a little over 3 years now. Wait, 2019? All right, so it's 4 years now. No, actually, January 20th is my 4th anniversary. I put up my first video January 20th on a new moon in 2015. All right, enough of that. So anyway, so the topics that I will be covering, or the topic, is really something right now, as you might have noticed from your YouTube feeds, depending on what you watch. Tartaria, okay, that name, Tartaria, or Tartary, and Tartaria has actually been quietly around for at least 3 years. I learned of it, and it was really covered quite a bit by Sylvie Ivanova of New Earth, the New Earth channel. So I just really want to give I'm going to give a shout out for all people here before I take my face off camera. But New Earth, for me, I mean, the reason why when this Tartarian thing hit, I wanted to get back into it because I've kind of mentioned it throughout my, when it was applicable in my YouTube videos, but nobody knew about it. And so now it's finally kind of, broke the critical numbers. And there is a group of people who are very much responsible for this. So I'll name them, but actually the interesting thing is, I mean, I know, one of the kind of dividing points of the truth community has been the shape of the earth. And I won't get into that conversation. I'm kind of like Max Egan, and a few other people who've expressed it, and more people are expressing it. I don't care. I don't have the vantage point. I really don't. If other people feel that they do, I'm not going to. I just don't feel I have the vantage point to make a decision one way or the other. And I also don't have a big emotional investment in it because I've been focusing on the problems of the parasites for a while. And Sylvia Ivanova of New Earth has been big. I mean, the parasites is kind of like her term as far as referring to the controllers. And so I'm not taking either side. I support whatever other people, whatever conclusions that they have come to, as long as we're focusing on the problems that we all us humans share on this earth. We're all on the same page. And I really feel that the focus on what we have in common, which is we have a common enemy, we have a common adversary, that's really kind of the focus, because I feel there's a lot to tease out of this story. Okay, so just a very quick mention of people who, I'll be using a lot of photos to kind of comment on. And many of my photos, I've done some of my own research too, but some of my photos are simply screenshots of all of the data from the research that that the names I'm about to mention have brought. And occasionally, when I show a picture, you might even see like Martin's face or Andreas's face. So anyway, New Earth, to me, is where it got the ball rolling for me. Oh, one more thing on the flat Earth. As far as, one of the brilliant things of the flat Earth movement was, as a community, they said, if they're lying about this, what else are they lying about? And so in many ways, for me, once again, their take on the various cover-ups, the cover-up that got the attention of many people was the shape of the earth for them. And that has now catapulted them into this next phase, which I feel is the crucial phase. And it's a phase that anybody who cares about the human species and the quality of life on this earth can be on board with. All right. So anyway, so the shout outs: Philip Druzhinin, Richard Lopez, Martin Liedtke, John Levy, UAP. I'm kind of doing them in chronological order as I posed them, as I met them. Max Egan. Max Egan has been a great peacemaker, and also how I found out about some of these other people. I've been listening to Max for years. I've even, I corresponded with him on Skype. And for me, he's been giving the same message for years. So now that he's also breaking out and discussing the parasites, Tartaria, the old culture, the old technologies, and just the massive cover up of our story. So Max Egan, a shout out to him. And then some of the newer people I've discovered is Andreas Virtus, Barnabas Nagy, and I think it's interesting that Barnabas is Hungarian, because if you've been listening to Max Egan and some of the what's kind of been coming out about the Magyar language, which belongs to the Finnic-Ugrit group, which the two languages, the languages that will be familiar to us as far as naming them were Hungarian and Finnish. So Barnabas Nagy, Static in the Attic, Jeff Dixon. I think I got everybody there. Yes. Oh, and I'm going to be showing some pictures about another major cover-up story, which is who are like kind of like the first Americans or the indigenous Americans. And so a shout out to Dane Calloway. If you haven't checked out Dane Calloway's YouTube channel, if you're interested in another aspect of the lies that have been told to us, especially around the color of our skin, and then of course the word that often gets used to indicate that, which is race. If I use the word race, I slipped. Race, I mean, another thing that a big part of the investigation is examination of our language and what is lying underneath it, because language is sound. Sound is vibration. So the sounds we're making are part of the streams that kind of work into the construct of reality that we live in. So the word race for me means competition, and I wouldn't want to think that human animals are in competition with each other in the sake where there'll be a winner and there'll be losers. To me, each person, myself included, like even being on YouTube, and other people sometimes are in competition. I'm in competition with no one except myself. I have concepts of what I think is excellent, and I compete with myself to live up to my own high standards. And I rarely get to grab the ring, but I'm aiming for it, and it is that desire to be excellent that at least hopefully will produce something good. Often I might use ethnicity, which works fine for me, but it's skin color, the skin color of the human animal. I don't use I won't use the human race. Human animal works fine for me because, again, I'm a very nature-oriented person. Love this earth, love her, and so for me, there's the human animal, and the human animal comes in a variety of colors, and of course, there's regional facial features, and some of it. So I'm going to kind of start out with I think Native Americans. I have a folder to go through. So kind of what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up the folder, show the pictures, and then comment on them. And I have them in some kind of rough order, so I'm not all over the place. But being all over the place sometimes helps me to tie threads in. Because we're weaving a tapestry. And it's kind of interesting. We're kind of unweaving a really rotten tapestry so that we can obtain what threads are ours, which are the true threads, and reweave them and throw away the polyester. Okay? Because that's what the parasites have given us. A polyester reality. So I think without further ado, I'm going to let's see. First I'll put up my little Mystic Brew thing there, and then I can kind of call up my other. There we go. All right. So it begins. I guess my first topic is going to be the continent of Africa, because it's really interesting when people. The many researchers, like the ones who I just mentioned, they're researching and they're bringing data. So of course, every person will bring their data and will, maybe form some kind of hypothesis and opinion. I think it's way too early for any conclusions. And I guess I should make this fit. Hold on a second. I think it's Control F. Whatever. Whatever I was saying, I forget. One of the reasons I show my picture, so in case if I forget, you can I was having a senior moment or something. And so this is Africa, and it's from I forget what, these are some old maps, like from the 1600s. And it's not the greatest resolution, so even as I pull it, the more I pull it in for you to see closer, the worse the resolution gets. But basically what we're looking at is, this is now where, I hope you can see my little hand moving here. This here, which here is called the Libya Interior, because apparently everything kind of, I guess, west of Egypt was often referred to as Libya in the old days. And, but here you have Mauritania, which is now Morocco, and Mauritania is below Morocco in the modern map. But what we see here, however poor this picture is, and I might be able to pull up better ones, is all of these rivers. These are all rivers here. There's a few mountain chains look like these bumpy things here. These are the mountain chains. But all of these little lines that you see, these are all rivers. There's also some lakes in here. This is now the Sahara Desert. And last night I was watching a presentation. Who was the one who was kind of covering a lot of the old, I've been watching so many people. I can't give proper credit unless it reoccurs to me of who was showing a lot of the old maps. Oh, that's right. I think it was Barnabas Nagy. And again, people use the visuals for what the story they're trying to make. And he was making a very interesting, I think it was, he was looking for Tartary. And he started kind of like, in the 1500s, or Tartaria. And he was working through. And so since he was showing maps of the world, as he was showing Tartary, for me, I don't need to see Tartary, although I am interested in that it seems that, we don't necessarily have earlier dated maps, but I really wonder about the name of that country and whether or not that name is maybe 500, 600 years old, based on what is, as the maps kind of demonstrate, originally like one size of Tartary, then one Tartary, and then a Russian Tartary and a Chinese Tartary and an independent Tartary. So it obviously this culture went through its own spasms and self-identity. And also the name Tartaria is something I wish to address. I don't want, it's great to start out as a meme because we get going, and then then it's time to get a little more, look for a little more precision. But anyway, so here's Africa. I'm pretty sure this is 1600s to 1700s, and as you can see, there is no desert here. There might be a little dry area here, but generally all of what is now the Sahara Desert was filled with lakes and rivers, and obviously not a desert. And when Barnabas was going through his various maps, one of the things I was watching was at what point the word desert showed up. And as we started moving towards it, closer towards the 1700s, it seems around the 1700s, as they record time on these maps, or I-700 as you want. I mean, again, we have to be able to use this like a language that gets us there. This isn't, you know, to use the word is not to say that that's what it is. And by the way, this is a lake here, this is a lake here, this is a lake here, and these are all rivers here. And from the mountain chains, as usual, you'll have rivers running out of the mountains. So I was kind of noticing, and one of the things I noticed is that when he was showing the pictures of Tartary, and what is now the Arctic Ocean was called, you know, either the ocean or the Sea of Tartary, you know, all in Latin or French. So, you know, sometimes you'd have Oceania, sometimes you'd have Mer, M-E-R, which is sea. And then you'd have Tartarias, Tartary, whatever. So you had that, and then at one point, starting around the 1700s, rather than Tartarian Sea, you know, I'm going to translate, it says Glacial Sea. And then ultimately, as we move later on, like into the late 1800s, whatever, it turns into the Arctic Ocean. So it seems to me, and then with New Earth, I mean, we're going back a few years, but she had some pictures of, you know, photos when photos started, like I guess, you know, in the mid 1800s, of Russia. Now, you know, just what part of Russia? I mean, Russia obviously has some more, you know, more northern, more southern parts, but parts of Russia with palm trees in them. So obviously the climate has changed over the ensuing 300-400 years, you know, and probably the last 10,000 years. And if you have a different time scale, please, that's not a point of contention with me. You can, whatever, I'm not insisting on any time scale. I need a language to communicate with. So maybe I can find another better map here. There we go. A little better. And there's an intro. I've seen a bunch of other maps. I don't have all of them, but this depiction of these kings here is very interesting. And I'm going to get to that. But anyway, so it appeared. But as I noticed the maps changing, as the wording in the maps indicated that the ocean that once was the Tartarian Ocean or Tartarian Sea became the Glacial Sea and then the Arctic Ocean. It seems as soon as that language up there starts, the desert starts. So it seems almost as if, like, as the northern part, or the part, you know, above the continent of Tartary was getting colder, northern Africa was getting drier. So what's particularly interesting, I thought, about this map is how they portray the kings here. They're just a little paler than you might expect to see in Africa. Now, of course, one of the things we shouldn't forget is this whole area up here is really there's still the Berbers are still there, and the Berbers are largely what we might consider Caucasian. And you see, here you go, you see one right over here. Okay. So you see these rather unmelanated fellows, you know, representing some kind of sovereigns. But it is interesting. They're not all bedecked like, you know, the parasitic royalty. You know, the people have always had their leaders, and usually their leaders were related to them. And there's another fellow sitting over here. So anyway, as we see, and again, but the other interesting thing is we see over here, we see from the mountains, apparently, this, you know, we have all, these are lakes here, these are all rivers. Here's a river from this mountain running out into the sea, more mountains, and as usual, rivers running out into the ocean, or in this case, the Mediterranean Sea. But not a very dry looking place. As you know, but as we noticed over here, there's a few less lakes than like in the other picture, so this apparently might be a little bit later. This is from 1525, okay? So, and it appears that there's not a lot of detail for this area, which might be why there's not some rivers, but as you can see, what is now desert. And over here, here's Egypt. You can always tell Egypt because of the delta here. And this would be the Nile coming out of Ethiopia. And then, of course, they had the word Ethiopia at one point. And a lot of old maps, Ethiopia is more west than on the Horn of Africa, which is very interesting. And then we also have this very interesting kind of depiction here of It says Celopodes, but there's like no head here. It looks like it has a head on its face. Very strange stuff. I mean, these old maps can be very funny. And of course, also, I used to do live streams. I feel that the live streams can not only be distracting to me, they can also be distracting to whatever's being said, because there's two different things going on. There's what's happening from the video, and there's what's happening in the chats. So I've decided to kind of cover this material without chats. And if somebody has something nasty to say, let them put it in the comments rather than using the chat. And all right, so that's this map. Here's another map. Where is this? This is again 1525 yet again, but we still see, well, this is actually a boundary here, but we see the rivers here. These are all rivers, lakes. Looks like the lakes that were drawn on the other one are drawn a little differently here. But again, this is not a desert. I mean, not with all this much water running through it. So this is very interesting. So in 1525, the 1500s, Northern Africa, what is now the Sahara, wasn't a desert. Where is this? Now this is 1694. And by the way, here's Grand Tartary, okay? And what do they have a name here? Here you go, Sea of Tartary, Mer de Tartary. All right, so that's what they're calling it in 1694. And if we come over here to where the Sahara now is, once again, look at all the river systems. I mean, this place is festooned with river systems. All right. So even as almost at the the dawn of the 1700s, there was no desert. I think I just made a kind of a little, and that's Andreas. I mean, that's not Andreas. That's Barnaby Nagy. But once again, look at all. I mean, this is now Mauritania, or part of Mauritania and part of Morocco. Look at all the rivers. Look, I mean, this place is filled with rivers. Okay. What's this? This is 1561, so we're back in the 1500s. And again, there's just but look at the rivers. All right. There's no desert here. All right. Except, like I said, remember that little bit in the interior, right here in the middle. Okay, in the middle. This says Tropicus Deserta Libya, because in the old writing, the F's and S's looked a little bit alike. Although in the same writing, you'll see they use S's and this other thing. Makes you wonder if they weren't saying things differently. So if there's any, so it looks like at this point, kind of like in the middle of the 1500s, this little area here, they're kind of considering desert, but right here is a river. So it seems like because there's no rivers running north-south through here, apparently this place is a little bit arid. But right over here's rivers. So this little center here apparently is where it kind of gets going. Here's 1525 again, and once here's the Mediterranean up here, and so here's that interior that they just kind of here's that Libya. So you can see there's a few less rivers in here, but nothing like right now, just one vast expanse of desert from one side of Northern Africa to the other. Where this is 1655, and this is, I think, where is this? Okay, this is Northern Africa. So if you don't, this is Sicily over here. This is Tunisia. Tunisia here, actually, this is where Carthage was based. Carthage was in Tunisia, and Carthage itself was kind of like right based here or here. The actual city of Carthage, and not just the empire of Carthage. But once again, we're looking. I mean, look at this river. I mean, look at the meandering of it. And let's see. It's kind of hard to get. So if we know this is Tunisia, then this is modern Libya. Okay, and as we can see, look, Libya is just. Look at this. All right. So that's 1655. This is 1550 again, so we're back in the 1500s. I didn't put them in. All right, so now we're done with Africa. We're going to start with some Now, okay, this is probably my time. Maybe I'll even go back on camera for a second. Okay. Tartaria, the name. Um, Now, just a little disclosure. My mother, whose maiden name was Saracen, I know that was spelled different than the Saracen of Saracen, which at one point was kind of synonymous with Muslim or Tatar. One of the things that kind of comes out in studying Tartaria is especially after Genghis Khan or Chinggis Khan kind of moved through the area, because Tamerlane, his grandson, converted to Islam. So it was shortly, it was like 2 generations after Chinggis Khan that a Khan became Muslim, and kind of what the Khans did happened to others. I don't want to, I'm going to use different segments to kind of break down some of the things. But when it comes to Tartaria, obviously that's what it was called on the maps. At least after the year 1000. Again, whatever that means. And but this culture is much older, and I think when we even listen to some of the legends of Atlantis, and even some of the architecture. I mean, and some of the architecture actually kind of goes when you see some of these fantasy pictures of Atlantis or whatever. Again, things out of our imagination. How much they resemble it, and a lot of that imagination could be part of our second attention or genetic memory. Second attention is just a term that's not important. Our imagination. That place where we have reveries, inspiration, things like that. That part of kind of almost like a trance state. The daydreaming state is a light trance. So Tartary. So I'm going to refer to this culture as the old culture, O-L-D-E, kind of like, the Renaissance spelling of it. But it's a culture, and with an ethos, and especially because through the legends of Atlantis, and part of the legends of Atlantis, you have to include the readings of Edgar Cayce. And the names aren't important, like the sons of Emilius and this, and the law of one, whatever. I don't like the word law very much. I'm a Tao person, the way, not the law. But that's not important. But anyway, so they have like one group that supposedly was the Emilius group, a law of one, and then you had the sons of Belial, and clearly, one side, the sons of the Emilius group, was supposedly the good ones, and the sons of Belial were the bad ones. Once again, depending on who's telling a story, we don't know who the good ones or bad ones by other people's narratives. We know them by their fruits. Excuse me. And so I'm just going to use the word old culture. If I'm talking about the geographical location of Tartary, I will use that. But like, in other words, if I'm going to show this picture here, which is from Atlanta in 1848, to me this is signs of that old culture. I'm not going to say this is a Tartarian building. All right. If somebody else wants to call it Tartarian, that works. But I'm trying to not lock things down where a name means more than it might be. Right now, for me, Tartary is a country that exists, and we'll see those on the maps. We already saw one instance of it. And one of the things that's interesting about this picture of Atlanta is known for a huge underground area, kind of like Montreal. In Montreal underground is huge, but Atlantis has one too. And one of the things this old culture was known for, besides their stone work and architecture, was their ability to burrow, and burrow with greatness. And all of the modern great cities have these incredible sewer systems that are not accountable by the official record. San Francisco is one, London's another, the sewers of France, Istanbul, the water tunnels into New York City, including at least the fact that it seems rather apparent that there were many underground subways that are a lot older. I mean, there's an old city hall station that's closed, and it's kind of like that, the opulent stuff that we see in Moscow subways. This is but also, again, on another interesting note. All right, so we have these people. Again, this mud flood. We'll have some evidence of the mud flood. Now I'm going to comment on the terminology. There's a lot of terms that are being used, and they've been great because they're rallying points. Anybody wants to continue using them in a more generalized sense is good, but my intellect does not allow me to do that. So I'll be, I'm going to be a little bit of a pedant around that, or being pedantic. And my vocabulary, I just apologize for it. It's how I spoke in my house. My mother was a genius. And an RH negative woman with hazel eyes, blah, blah, blah. I have my own opinion on the RH negative, but I don't want to go there. So anyway, what's interesting in this picture, okay, besides the fact that there's a lot, you have this grand picture, and then you have this rubble on the street. And this is in 1848. This is probably not all that long after whatever cataclysm that hit many parts of the world and deposited huge amounts of sediment or mud or clay struck. But what I find interesting in this picture is, okay, so these people here, at least these are the fellows, these young men, are, kind of pale. Looks like the person, the oldest one in the group, well, she's not looking so pale. She's dressed mighty nice too. And so again, I think there's a lot of narrative in the current parasitic model of the world that apparently may not have been part of how we related to each other not very long ago, and that's also going to be part of this video. All right, so this is Atlanta. This is a picture of St. Petersburg in Russia. And what's interesting, and now one of the interesting things, of course, is it looks like a ghost town. Now, of course, there are, because of the long shutter exposures, people can disappear, but there's not a whole lot of shadowy images here. But that's not important. The thing is, just this kind of architecture. This is, and a big part, and we're going to get into atmospheric electricity. People call it free electric. Of course, it was free once you built the equipment to get it. But you have this thing here, and you see some of the other pieces here, and that's not a cross. That's a gathering apparatus, gathering or receiving. And then you have these very ornate and beautiful lampposts around this. I don't have a timing on this, but I do believe it's the middle of the 1800s. And there seems to be a lot of out-of-place type of, lighting in some of these photos. This is just for the pure architecture. This is the Auckland University clock tower. And the narrative that the goofballs give, excuse me, of why it was built is because the university, which is down here, was in danger of leaving. And of course, they claim to have built all this stuff. That's another story. Other people are telling that story very well. So that's the other thing. I'm not going to try to do a lot of overlap. I mean, the pictures will certainly, you might see a lot of these pictures dozens of times, and I think there's a value into seeing the same thing over and over again, because some of this stuff needs to be burned into our consciousness so that it evokes our genetic memories. So one of the things that the parasites were very much about time, Chronos, Saturn, that kind of energy. And so what were originally portals for, it is my deduction that since these, these are energy gatherers. All these little nubby things on all this stuff is to maximize the surface area for the collection of electrons. Electrons are everywhere. And of course, one of the reasons these towers were built so high is to get over where the breeze would be occluded from the buildings. So up here, the breezes can move. The more breeze that moves, the more fresh electrons are brought into there. And so this not only does this maximize, give us greater surface area because they're adding more surface to the apparatus, but also the very shape creates little eddyings, little vortices as the wind blows by. I mean, the wind's blowing by, then it hits this thing, it creates one vortice, but these other ones create other vortices. So it kind of creates these little wind currents that'll stay in place a little longer. And by them staying in place a little bit longer, they're able to have their electrons plucked from them somewhat. All right? And that's so part of what this dissertation will be, part of my understanding of how this earth tech worked, or what Martin Liedtke and a lot of the other people are calling it antiquitech. I like that term a lot. Antique technology, antiquitech. In this case, the QU, which is normally sounded like a K, like an antique. In this case, when antiquitech, we get the qua sound from the QU. All right, but look, and then you have these ribbings, and again, part of the, and as you're going to see over and over again, there's always these little openings, and this is for the wind to pass through, and it maximizes the amount of atmosphere, electron-carrying atmosphere, that can be attracted to these things and then put into capacitors. I am learning to build amps, and learning about capacitors is very interesting because they can get dangerous because they build up so much energy, and then when something that is grounded is attached to them, like you touching one of them, they can really release a lot of energy. Another interesting thing is when you're working on amps, you drain those capacitors so you don't get shocked. But if you leave the amp alone for 2 days without turning it on and you go back, you could get shocked again because the capacitors have pulled energy just from being in the atmosphere where electrons are ubiquitous and all over the place. Okay? This is also in Australia. And I find this one particularly interesting. Again, there's Barnabas. Look at these. Okay, so here's, again, and they're claiming, this is 1821. They're claiming this was built in 1821. I think the picture was taken not a whole lot longer. And again, the parasites are claiming that they built all this stuff. And meanwhile, it shows hundreds of years of aging. But again, we're going to see these towers back here. Again, you see that knobbiness. And of course, I think it's aesthetically pleasing, and that's what genius does. It combines form and function. Okay? So the form means it's aesthetic. It's gorgeous to look at. It has sacred geometry, has Fibonacci proportions to it. And it also has a function, that these very things that look so aesthetically pleasing actually increase the function. It's not just a decoration. It actually enhances the performance of the tech. So now we come down here, and we see that there were what looked to me to be like the original lights that were here, and we see two very interesting things. Now look at these gates around them. I don't think, it doesn't look to me like in other words, if it opens on this side, it wouldn't be all that. I don't really think. I think what we're seeing here is that this wrought iron helps to collect the energy, and then you have these other little receiver things to feed. I think these two metal grids around these posts are to feed energy here, and these are the energy collectors, and I guess there's probably a difference in polarity with the stone itself. So these get hypercharged, these get all filled with electrons. These are not as charged, so what you get is the electrons from here jump into this. Now this becomes charged, and then if you have a piece of tech in here that is hungry for electrons, it'll pull it up and light itself. So you have collection, in other words, a cathode, an anode for it to jump to, and then another anode because once this fills up, it kind of becomes cathode-y. The whole thing about electrons is just like air pressure. And lots of electrons is like a high pressure system. A high pressure system wants to move to a low pressure system. A high electron count wants to go to a lower electron count because homeostasis and finding a balance is what is in the construction, or the how the universe works. How's that? How's that for language? Okay. So anyway, this is again St. Mary's in Sydney. This is Australia. And he covers the history of the Australia. I mean, the official history, when somebody kind of points out the inconsistencies, is right. It's in our faces, but we never really thought they would lie to us about history, would they? Well, so when a lot of these people came to the conclusion for themselves with their perceptions that the Earth was flat, they said, if they're lying to us about that, what else are they lying to? And now this flat Earth movement is bringing out all this research. Beautiful. Thank you. This is Australia too. This is a picture from 1874, and one of the things I noticed is it's basically decommissioned. I mean, all these buildings. This would have been filled with all those various statues of muses and ancestors. It was a slightly different spirituality to the old culture. You can see that this has been empty. There's no way the old culture would have left this empty. But of course, it was offensive to the new people and their concept of what's, I guess, sacred. This window is bricked up. All these windows are bricked up. Basically, this beautiful, wonderful building has been abandoned. Where is this? This is the Australia Post Office. The post offices are very interesting when we consider from a legal a law perspective. There's one guy a couple of years back was speaking about the primacy of the post office even over governments or whatever. That's not my thing. So it's not unrealistic that what the original builders called the post office might have been that because communication was so important to them. But I'm quite sure there was a lot more going on. But we see, again, here's the clock towers. Now here's one of the things I want to point out about some of these things. We see all these different things. Now these might actually have ways of getting in there where people could spend time for fresh air. Because once again, there's the energy that they were working with didn't have just applications for, let's say, electricity. It also was collecting ether, has very healing properties. So at one level, from my holistic stance, holistic spelled with a W, as in wholesome, and all the whole, not rather than the modern spelling of holistic that is spelled like a hole in your shoe. But again, this is about maximizing the exposure. So whatever direction the wind blows, it's able to enter in here. Each one of these little columns, again, has its own surface area to collect electrons, and because of the shape, it'll create nice, very beautiful spirals. So again, the wind comes in here, and then it starts to spiral around, hangs a little bit longer. And then the other thing is, when you have vortexes, you always go kind of spin off to a 0 point. The vortexes actually pull new, fresh energy out of the ether. So although the wind may have X amount of electrons, once they get these vortices, they actually will be able to pull more actual, real, whatever an electron is, as opposed to being, let's say, not quite fully manifest. The vortices that are created tap into the actual ether, not just the electric part of the ether, but the ether. And then tapping into that ether allows them to tap into electricity as well. So the whole idea of creating vortices is to tap deeper into the ether and not just rely on the electrons carried by the air itself. And then the other amazing thing is, these don't look like anything like a modern lighting pole. As we can see, they're kind of coming off of here. There's some kind of faux construction going on here or whatever. Again, this is supposedly, probably that's saying, oh, this is during the late phases of construction. Yeah, right. Would it take you 500 years to build this? Because this building's been around for a while. But I mean, just look at this array, okay? This array is astounding. And as you can see, it's doing a lot of work. and this is in 1890. Next one, there is this. Oh, this is the Australian Town Hall. So again, let us look at some of the Antiquitech. So here, basically, they apparently doesn't seem to be a lot, like they don't have like the fences of those other ones did for energy collection, which is my theory. Okay, but as we can see, we have lights here. They're on top of stone. Some of the, and that's why sometimes when you don't see lights on stone or in metal, there's a lot of times you'll see a little more energy collection with different wings and things. But look at this construction. Up here, a lot of the squarer things, you'll see all of these little antennas reaching out. Over here, and you know, these kind of shapes, apparently they're round like this. You know, this is still, but these are kind of capacitors. The domes apparently are massive capacitors, but apparently you couldn't always do like a full dome. But these, you know, apparently were good stand-ins. And if you do study electronics, you know there's all kinds of capacitors. Some of them will hold more and do less. And methinks that they had it down to, like, if you had this much space or in this kind of configuration and this kind of geometry, it would generate X, Y, or Z amount, and maybe even certain qualities. But look at, I mean, when we see the detail, and those round windows. I believe these round windows are portals, and I think they might have served two purposes. One might have been to possibly channel excess energy, but once again, they're not just collecting electrons, they're collecting ether. And these are like portals that allow kind of, to me, these are like almost like outlet valves. So this will store, but you know, you get to a point of too much storage. And so they were pushing all this really beautiful energy out into the surrounding environments, which created cities of harmony and healing. Again, we see one of those interesting poles. We see all these lights here. This is 1886. And this is Australia, you know, hardly, you know, which according to official things is, you know, not quite New York City. Although it's funny, you'll find buildings in New York City that look just like this. Perhaps it was the same old culture. And again, the tech, and so here again, these originally were just bigger portals, like you see on these little ones, like over here. I was showing you these little. This isn't the greatest. We'll see those portals in other pictures. But again, you see, everybody's like, oh, I mean, again, these are aesthetic. But when you realize that part of this is energy collection, and then look at these back here, okay. And then so there's a couple of different parts of this Antiquitech that I'm looking at. Okay, so one is, you know, we have the general gatherers, and I also sometimes I wonder if these aren't not just gatherers, but maybe also part of transmission. But it seems like obelisks and towers are more of that, which might be part of this. But you can collect and broadcast too. But anyway, so here's kind of like, you know, to me, more of a capacitor shape. To me, it's very clear that this was meant to accumulate some energy, in which case, though, it might then have been able to get broadcast, because you have this whole open area, you have all these pillars, you have the breeze blowing through here, you're creating vortices, you're creating extra energy from the vortices, pulling energy from the very ether itself. And then you have the kind of stepping down. I'm quite sure these originally were just big portals so the energy could go different ways. The other thing that I want to mention about this old world architecture is that they know that right angles are not harmonious to what's sacred. Okay, the square is a box. It's meant to box things in. So when you look at much of this, you can see how much they minimize right angles projecting into the public space. As you can see here, there's like, you know, when you look at this, you won't be looking directly at a right angle. See over here how they're smoothed out. You'll see this over and over again as I show you some old pictures, that the truly old ones, and apparently there seems to be a little bit of a decline phase and a little bit of shared, like, you know, the new people were still working with some of the old ones. And the tales are told even, you know, where the Romans met the Etruscans and they learned from them and then they turned on them. The Greeks met the Pelasgians, learned from them, and then turned on them. I think a similar thing might have happened in the Americas, where the parasites first showed up and wanted to learn what they could couldn't learn a whole lot, just like the Greeks don't learn a whole lot. Much of what we see is what they inherited. Same thing with the Romans. That's why we see aqueducts all over. Wherever you see this kind of tech, you usually find some aqueducts where they need to be built. But again, this minimization of right angles is a big part of what they do, because it's right angles are jarring. They point at you. In feng shui, they'd be called poison arrows. Okay, and feng shui is energy management of the energy space. I mean, there's a lot of extra stuff that gets in there, but I'm just talking about the basics of it. So anyway, so this town hall here, okay, Sydney. All right, now let's get into skin color, not races, just humans. And this is the Americans, and this is from Dane Calloway's site, I'm pretty sure. About what's American and what's an African American. Well, these are the people who were here, and we see humanity in all its gorgeous beauty. Look at this woman here. Again, we see different features. There's a certain complexion or melanin content. She's a little melanin light, but then the features, interesting features. Look at this fellow. He has what might be called European kind of facial bone structure, but he's melanated. Then we have this fellow here. Again, he's kind of like, if you took these two, and you might end up with his kind of sweet coffee color there. All right? Again, these are indigenous Americans. That's what they are. This isn't some half European, half African. No, these are Americans. These are indigenous people. And then we have this lady here. All right? She could be Native American. She could be what we call Bulgarian, Romanian, Gypsy. Again, this is humanity. That's what this is. And the indigenous people were humans. And they looked to each like anybody with smart, just like animals. Even in the animal kingdom, when it comes to the rut and mating, the alpha females will only mate with good males, and vice versa. And I'm quite sure there was in these days, you breed, you think about the 7 generations. Well, you better think about your stock. You better think about your genetic stock. And it isn't about melanin. It's about good nature. It's about good intellect, robust health. No genetic, no kind of carryover genetic diseases that will haunt you down the generations. And these people knew that, which is why they were so fit and beautiful looking. I mean, these people are beautiful. Okay, these are Apaches, and these are actually being held by the American military. And gee, what melanin group do they belong to? Well, looks like a little bit of everybody. And again, once again, nose bridges are a little bit part. I mean, look at this guy, almost like or lady. It's almost like an Armenian nose, and then this nose is different. I mean, and then this lady. This lady is melanated, and so is this lady. Sorry, these are all Apache women. But I mean, again, these are the Native Americans. This isn't some Native American who mated with an escaped slave. No, this is how they were. And what they did was they designated them Africans because they were playing a game. All right? These are, again, this is at the same place. These are men. And once again, if you think this looks like just one specific genetic strain, I mean, we see humanity represented here. Now this is whatever it is. This could be a victim. Once again, there were so many people who were just asleep and stupid and just following orders. This gentleman. Now, actually, looking at him, I mean, looks like Cuba Gooding Jr. a little bit. Again, America was not what we're told it is. Surprise, surprise. This is Charleston. I'm pretty sure it's Charleston, Virginia. And it's, again, it's a terrible photo. but we see the building. It's kind of, you know, humble in its size. But what do we see? We see, they've cut away the top, but we see all these iron gates here. And what's interesting is, you see all this iron here? It's very interesting that attached to the iron, and you can see just kind of like an armatures on these things. It's just really, I mean, see just like kind of like these different legs here, different legs, little wings here. So my theory, my hypothesis is that these were gathering energy and these were able to make use of it. I mean, think of a modern LED light. Chances are it's not new, and how little wattage it takes. I mean, how minuscule to kind of, you know, to create some kind of light. Very small amounts of wattage. I mean, the two lights, when you see me here, you see me sitting between two 9-watt bulbs, a total of 18 watts. If those were incandescent bulbs, to get the same light, it would have to be at least 120 watts. Okay. Now this is, I guess, you know, this is to me a picture of this culture. Just the dress, again, if you look at their statues, they were very much into this, you know, that just the beautiful world, and not, you know, not looking like a bunch, you know, just to me elegant, you know. And when I first looked at this, I go, oh, look at all these, you know, unmelanated people. When I took a closer look at these people, looked a little different to me. First of all, okay, so she looks like she might be a blondish red or whatever, but this woman here looks like she could be like an Armenian or, you know, Arabic. All right, look at her. All right, could be Native American. Once again, there is different melanin. I mean, look at her and her. I mean, this is people of a high culture, and melanin didn't matter. If you know, if somebody had it and they were good stock, then of course your offspring would show whatever melanin you contributed to the gene pool. Melanin isn't important, unless of course you intend to live in the sun, then it could be important. I don't even know why I put it. This is from one of the expos. The expos are their own thing, and I might cover that. Where is this? This is Des Moines, Iowa. Okay. Des Moines, Iowa, and they're claiming that they have all kinds of bullshit stories about how they build this. Now here's what I'm talking about: the portals. All right. This would be the main capacitor. All right. This is where the energy kind of like really kind of accumulates. And as you notice, in each one of these things, there's a portal. Look over here. Portal, 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 portal. Then we go, oh, that's just for aesthetics. Well, again, form and function. That's what genius does. Now, look at this very shining bulb up here. Apparently, they're to enhance and I think to really potentize, if you really want to go for the gusto, you have a mercury-filled ball. And I do believe these were mercury-filled balls. There's something about mercury. Again, there are certain people who the word gravity is a terrible word, so I'm not going to use the word, but I have to use the word anti-gravity to demonstrate whatever the tech is that allowed the flying ships to work. Again, I don't know what the force is. I don't need to name it. All I know is it defied whatever it is that normally makes something fall to the ground if it has any weight and you let go of it. So there were certain kinds of tech that allowed the weight of something to not really be there. And in every instance of those technologies, especially from the Vedas, it involves mercury. This does look to be like a gold dome. And the noble metals, there's a difference between noble metals that creates anode and cathode differentials between them. In other words, certain ones are more anode-like and certain ones are more cathode-like. In other words, certain ones are more hungry for electrons than other metals. And when you combine them, you create a pressure system. One metal is greedier, or hungrier is the proper word, hungrier for electrons than another, but once it kind of fills up and it's like burping, the lesser one will say, yeah, I'll take some of those electrons off your hand. Once you have a flow of electrons from one to another, that's what's called is current. All right, just like if you have a high pressure system going to a low pressure system, creates an air current. If you have water up in the tower and then you have a hose going to lower, you'll have a water current. And that's exactly how electricity works. And that's how these things work. I mean, look at all these, again, you can see all these little domes here and those little things. I mean, look at this. And again, they're claiming that they built this. The story about the building of this is so bogus. And the other thing that we notice about the fact that because we can't see, this is probably what is calling a mud flooded building. I'm going to get into that terminology. But let's look at these trees. These trees, what are they, 20, 30 years old? These are not old trees. The continent of America is an old continent. Where would the old trees be? And a lot of people ask that question, and it seems like there was a cataclysm that either killed them or buried them. Where is this? This is Fireman's Building. I think this is in New York City. And this one they haven't even decommissioned yet. As you can see, okay, so they have a fireman up here. Makes sense. And of course, one of the things you could do with your statuary, especially if it was metal, is they would then act as another attractor. Again, the genius of form and function working together. But as you can see, they have all these things here. If you look a little closer, you can see there's wiring all over. This is terrible. But you can see the wiring here. And these different, maybe you can't, but you can certainly see it here. And say, oh, it's holding up the statue. Well, you're entitled to your own opinion. And I won't take anybody to task, because these are all theories. I have no conclusions. Everything you're hearing here is supposition and theorizing, hypothesizing. But the other interesting thing here is, okay, so once again, we have something that looks like it collects energy, and here we see the lamps, and of course they could be electrical lamps. I'm not going to jump to any conclusions, but once again, now if you look here, especially on the street level where everybody's interfacing, the minute, even so, some of these might have a little right angle thing, but again, there's none of those harsh right angles like in the modern building, just jutting out, with that poison arrow of like, what are you pointing at me? And then over here, you could see, yeah, that's a right angle, but it's way above street level. Again, people are interacting, and here's where the energy basically happens. Up here, it's pretty harmless, aesthetically and as energy. All right, the largest country hidden by fake history. Again, these are multiple screenshots from all the people I mentioned at the beginning, but here they have, these are, I think these are these the naval? No, these are not. These are actual flags. There's also naval flags, and it's interesting. Some of the flags we see here. Well, there's Persia with its lion. There's Siam, modern day Thailand. Look at Japan. Japan wasn't the rising sun. If anything, these are the colors of Holland. They're also the colors of modern day Israel and Greece and other ones. Okay, colors have a little message of their own. So here's China, which and here's Tartaria. So in here, I mean, they're kind of similar things. What's interesting is that this one is facing east. This one is facing west, and then there's another part of China. China, again, China has its official history, just like America has its official history. Bullshit. Anyway, and then you have Arabia, a flag for Jerusalem. I mean, it's just very Tripoli. That's where the Barbary pirates were. So anyway, on we go. This is I'm pretty sure a picture. This is from Dane Calloway again. Dane Calloway is all about that what are largely known as African Americans. Not that there was zero Africans that were brought over by the slave trade, but apparently America received 8% of the world African output. And so basically most of the people that we think of as African Americans are in fact Native Americans. But I believe this is like from where you have a snake mounds, but again, these are very humble dwellings, no particular tech. But I do believe these were like in the plains. The Great Plains are flood plains. So to me, what's brilliant about this, because we can see these don't exactly look to me like, these look like dwellings. So it looks to me like these people at the foresight is, well, gee, if a flood comes through this area, here's my house, and the flood can just make my mound a little bit bigger. This is ingenious. To build, to put your, if you were in a flood-prone area like the Great Plains are, to elevate even your basic house. This way here, when floods come, you throw out a fishing rod. I don't know, gather firewood that floats by, whatever. This is a building called the Gillander Building with its own nonsense kind of stories. This is in New York City, and we see it stand side by side with some of the other older architecture. Now here's a case in point of eliminating the right angles. Okay, look at this building. On the corner that juts out into the street where everybody had to be subject to it, it's mellow. That's what makes me think they're talking about that this was a later build. One of the things that makes me think it's a later build, and maybe they just elevated the stuff, is because this has right angles all the way down. See? And this is on the corner. In any of the other pictures I have of buildings on corners, you never, ever see a right angle when it was built by the old culture. And then over here you see a little building sandwich in there. It looks like it might be the old culture. And if buildings were in between each other or buttressed, they wouldn't have to worry about the right angles because they weren't jutting out. See how this is like a knife edge cutting into the public space? Now across the street we have another old building. See how it's on the corner and it's rounded? See how this building was rounded? So this is not only the aesthetic, but this is how we know that these were a benevolent people and not just these were true Aryans. And Arya is a word that actually meant, it's where aristocracy comes from. It's a noble class, and in this case the word noble is noble, about noble behavior, not these pretend royals and nobles who, because of their blood, you're supposed to worship. No. They were called nobles because they acted nobly, and I'm talking about the real ones, not the later ones who took all the designations and just turned out to be nothing but scumbags and parasites. But again, at the top of this building, that's what they said they rebuilt it. I wonder if they somehow didn't elevate it, because up here you see much of the same stuff. You see all these little areas for air to pass through, and up here, but this who knows, this might be the only original piece. But this looks a little bit, but the rest of this, again, there was clearly a crossover period of the original people who, the old culture, and then the incoming culture. And I guess the incoming culture initially played nice until they had some of the resets, and then they went for the juggler. Golden Door of Transportation at the Columbian Exposition. Again, it's a shame these are such bad resolution. But okay, you see all this beautiful, inlay frieze work, the multiple arches, and have some kind of Fibonacci, sacred geometry to them. Just beautiful working here. And then these little cupolas for a little bit of, this could be a little bit of energy collection. And this could be, again, especially with the expositions, you have layering. You have some of the original stuff. This looks original to me back here. Whether this facade here is original, don't know. One of the things that makes me go, maybe not, the right angle. Okay. This is what I call the Gothic England. This is from England. All right, and once again, let's look at this architecture. Here are the corners, no right angles. No right angles here. This is another picture of that Iowa. Oh no, the other one was Des Moines. I'm not sure. Maybe this is the same building. But they seem to have, there's everything, there's no aerials on top of these. Have been kind of decommissioned, but you can still see. Again, remember I was talking about like how when I showed you that place in Australia where this was all blank. They never left this blank. This was all, they always had some kind of scene here. Okay, so anyway, we've kind of seen this. And interestingly enough, in the earlier pictures, remember we saw all those trees? I'm pretty sure this is I'm pretty sure this is the same building. You notice. It's even, the trees are even younger now. All right, this is interesting. King Charles of England. I think that's just an interesting. I mean, he looks a little bit. Let's. Could we say Arab? Who's this? God, I forget which king this is, but look at him. Okay? Would you look at this fellow? Who knows? That might even be his real hair, not a wig. I mean, very rich, full lips. Looks a little on the melanated side. You know, got a nice, got a good sized nose there. This is, I find it to be fairly interesting picture of one of the kings. I forget which king this one is. All right, King James I of England, the Fourth of Scotland. Once again, just interesting. I mean, you know, he certainly got that sharp nose, and it could be. But if you look at his hair, doesn't he look a little on the nappy side? All right, this is San Francisco. And I think this is a good picture only because it shows you, like, when you look at this modern building here, okay? And then you get down here and you see one of these older buildings. But look at this whole row. Does this not look seriously out of time with the, you know, with this other stuff here? And look at these lights. It's a middle of the day, but these lights look like they could be on. And the chances are, if you're gathering electricity from the atmosphere, there would be no need to save energy because it's endless. But again, here we have like a capacitor dome, and then up here look like they have like little ovals. And sometimes once things get on, they start closing them things up because they know they don't know necessarily how to work the tech, but they know that this gives benevolent energy. And parasites don't want people feeling good; they want them fearful. They want them on edge. They want them adrenalized. Adrenaline is an interesting chemical. Adrenaline takes blood out of almost every non-essential part of our body and puts it into the muscles for the fight or flight reaction. And one of the biggest places that when our body's not in a state of near panic, or at least in some kind of fear with adrenaline release, so much blood is in our frontal cortex, or the part that we do our thinking. When adrenaline is released, huge amounts of blood are pulled. Basically, all the blood that isn't required to keep you awake is pulled from your brain and pulled into your muscles. Can you understand why parasites would want us fearful and adrenalize as much as possible to keep that blood from going into our frontal or cerebral cortex and allowing us to actually think our way out of the nonsense? But over here we can see those little portal windows again. Where is this? Okay, now what's the mud flood? Now I think the mud flood, again, is a term that we can work, but you know, I was a science major, and just a general geek and a nerd. And so what I see, this is not the best example. This is a good example of once again, that there were full windows that have been covered up, and you can see as we go uphill, the windows disappear. So, and this is a big building. So the chances are the water, the actual flood, a water flood that is deep, moving fast, carrying tons of sediment, mud, clay, or whatever, is this, you know, going along, carrying all that stuff. And then when it hits the building, I bet you at the other end of this building, because it looks like this was, you know, this was the upstream. Probably at the other end of this building is a bunch of mud. But once the force of the water and its ability to carry debris slows down, it deposits. The mud will drop right where it is. And then the rest of the current will go around the building. But again, now it's going around, there's going to be little eddyings here. It's going to slow the water down. And so the further from the original, when the water hit the building and slowed down, it starts picking up speed. So when it first slows down, it drops more mud. And then as it picks up speed and can carry more of the debris again, it deposits less mud. And that's why you get these trails. I think a lot of these hills were not as steep as they were. They're obvious, water obviously always seeks a lower thing. So there was a general cast of the land, but I think the mud floods created a lot of the hills we see, because again they would hit buildings and then they would pile up there, spread across, and then gradually slope off as it made its progress. Here's another case. I tried to darken this photo, but it looked even worse then. But again, we see what would have been these windows have been kind of submerged. You can see there's a ramp that they had to build up to the new entry, because the old entry was buried. And we see little signs of the statuary and whatever. And in some cases they might have been part of the mythos, the muses, because they were very inspired by the muses. But it's also the ancestors. I mean, one of the things that modern ideologies speak about is, all those nasty ancestor worshippers. Again, when you're coming from a line of great people who've accomplished things, and you're going to accomplish greater things, and you do endure, you're comfortable. I mean, the ancient world all believed in reincarnation. The fact that there's no reincarnation is kind of a modern thing, introduced relatively modernly. I won't point any fingers or name any names. But so when you have this idea of continuity, and that even when your ancestors drop their body, they're still there, you kind of keep the party going. Depends on you're on one side of the veil or the other, but everybody's still kicking and working together. So the whole idea of ancestor veneration, if you grew up and you're looking around, you go, oh my God, this is what my ancestors gave me. Hey. And they're not, and even though they've left their bodies, they're not dead. Hey, shout out, And so there's like a celebration. I feel a lot of the statuaries celebration of both ancestors and a mythos. Okay, these are naval flags of the world. And there's Barnabas again. And there could be a lot, but Tartaria is down here. Where's Tartaria? Here we go. Here's Tartaria. Tartaria had 2 flags. Naval flags. One had their kind of the one that their state flag had, which is a griffin, and then they also had one with an owl. It's interesting. Morocco has scissors, which again speaks to skill. I mean, trades were everything. Without us, people who have trades didn't need jobs, because that's why they're called trades. If somebody has something you want, then you trade skills. That's why they're called trades, because they enabled us to trade with each other. And including, once things get going, you can trade on grand scales. But it was about trading, not money, not jobs. You had a trade, you had a skill. We had a trade, we had a skill. And and then when you start having a bunch of people that you leave ignorant and uneducated, then you start having a soldier class and other thuggish, unskilled labor. Might be very brave people. I'm not, bravery is not discounted, but again, it's, if we don't have a bunch of people, creating problems. Anyway, I don't want to get into that. Anyway, all right. So here he is. Here we go. Now what's this? I don't know if I can see a time on this. One of the things I also did notice is that Australia was originally called New Holland, and I'll get that. But look at here again. Let's just look into Northern Africa and just look at how. Over here. Look at the amount of streams coming out of the mountains here. All right. And here's Tartaria over here, and he was like pointing to some of the color coding, where if you notice that it looks like whoever was kind of had control or trade or whatever, whoever had influence. How about we'll use the word influence? The color that these map colors gave us some hints. So it's kind of interesting that here we have Tartaria, including the Chinese Tartaria and whatever, and then we have India in the same color. We have Arabia. This is Saudi Arabia now. Arabia. Here's Persia. Okay, this is Ukraine here. This is Thailand and Malaysia and Burma, what is now Myanmar. And of course, the whole coast and, Vietnam. And then it's interesting, so then you have these other, Borneo and Sumatra, but you can see some of the Indonesian islands seem to have an affiliation with this. And of course, out of India, you'd have the Vedic cultures, which are still obvious in Indonesia today, even though it is the largest Muslim country on the earth. Okay, similar, hooked into this color coding, Madagascar. And then over here we have Peru. We can only see part of, actually this is where Brazil would be now. But again, that color coding, it's kind of an interesting thing that Barnabas brought up. Where is this? Notre Dame. I just had a little picture. This is, in France, obviously. And of course we have these, these huge cymatic windows, which I believe were either whether it was the organ music or the collected energy. But again, it was to harmonize the environment. Here you see, here you see like that little ball on top, probably a mercury ball. You see the flaring there. You see those little nubs that help with more collection. Once again, you have those kind of these types that usually always have the iron up there. I guess that's how they're doing their electron collection or ether collection. And here's that huge portal right there. Here's the collector. Boom, like a cannon. And I don't think it was for control, other than to help people maybe control, unnecessary passions. Again, to keep them in a state of beauty and almost like a semi-dreamlike state. Because when you're not running around like an idiot trying to keep up with the clock, you can walk through this beautiful earth and appreciating the beauty. And then when you have architecture like this complementing the beauty, you just, it's almost like, it's like being in a living dream. This is something I found. Again, here's Barnabas again. This is the Seacliff Lunatic Asylum. At least that's what they're calling it. All right? So in other words, an insane asylum. A couple of things. First of all, let's look at the tech. All right? And they're claiming they built it in 1884. All right. I don't know if this was ever built as an intention for a lunatic asylum, but anyway, okay, we see this, and again, this is obviously a little bit of a lithographic thing, but we see the Antiquitech all over these buildings, okay, all over, and you can see the symmetry. Here's like a central point, then you have these two things on the side. But I do believe this was used as a lunatic asylum. Because my sense is, again, you had a native population in Australia. You had not only the Aborigines, you had the people who built the stuff. And when the parasites showed up, there was such a horror and such a shock. And not to mention, you probably had people who had been there for hundreds of years and knew what their story was as opposed to his story. And so what did they do with them? They locked them away in lunatic asylums because the indigenous population, both the, it might have been the indigenous, and then those who came a little bit later and joined in with the indigenes and just created a great culture for everybody. They were probably, saying, these people are liars. They didn't build this. They didn't build that. They just got here. They're claiming all blah, blah, blah. Put them in the lunatic asylum because they were bringing people over from Europe and restocking it, and they didn't want these new people to know that they were being lied to and just what was going on. So that's why I think you needed something as massive like this. Not that they built it as a lunatic, but why they took something as huge as this to lock up the lunatics, who were the ones who remembered and still had their history. This is the oldest photo of, Egypt? Morocco? No. This is San Francisco. This is the oldest photo of San Francisco. Does it not look like, this could have been like, the Acropolis in Greece or something. You got some modern buildings. Again, there's that right angle. Okay, so this is a modern building. But I mean, just the general setting, and look at this. This, you know, it's kind of like Notre Dame or something. And again, you know, you have this, you know, these capacitor, and again, those big open spaces with the poles. This is from 1871 Paris. Now, this here, we can see some Antiquitech on top of this building here. We see it here. What's interesting is here's what I would guess would be your normal Parisian citizens, and like over here. But look at these gentlemen. A couple of things going on with these gentlemen. First of all, this guy has a real sword on. Okay, so but it does look, I mean, this guy looks pretty close. They look pretty close to these gentlemen. They're at least a head taller than these people. And you can, you know, they're wearing the kind of what might be called harem pants. So these do not, these appear to not necessarily be native French people. And then the interesting thing is, so we can tell this has been around. You can tell by the weathering. But then we have some. This looks relatively new. What looks to be like a mosque, even though they use some of that. But this looks like a new building. And if you notice on top of the dome, it certainly appears that there's no tech on it. This is fascinating. This is also from 1871 Paris. All right, so if you notice, there's no cars. There'll be plenty of horse-drawn, lots of people out on this beautiful walk. But what do we see? We see an electric train here, because you can notice there's no connecting thing on the top. There's no steam engine. Similarly, when we look down on the street, look at all these trolley tracks. There's trolley tracks going this way, trolley tracks going this way, and in fact, here's a trolley with people on it. Here's a street lamp. And of course, it could be one of those old gas lights or whatever. But when you have this here and you have this here, you have to wonder why that would have to be gas. So I thought this was fascinating. It's 1871, and you have I grew up in the Bronx. Other than the fact that this looks a little older, this is kind of like what the Bronx elevated trains look like. And we also had some trolley tracks that were no longer in use. But I mean, this is a modern culture. They just hadn't invented the polluting combustion engine yet. And even if they knew how to do it, they wouldn't do it because it's bad for your health. It's garbage. Now, if you take away all the other tech and it's all you have, well, then it's great. But that's another story. This is an old photo of what Penn Station used to look like. I used to arrive in Penn Station every day when I used to live in Long Island and go to New York. But they demolished it to build the modern junk. Okay, once again, the elegance of it all. This is Phoenix, terrible photo, but Phoenix, Arizona, in the middle of the desert in 1890. There is a question mark there. I mean, look at this. Again, when we look at this architecture, does it really? It seems like it doesn't matter where we are because the signature. This is a signature of a culture. The Russian army giants. Apparently this is a picture taken. It might be in Russia, or maybe these are just the Russian army in Holland, maybe, or else they also use the same tech. I have some, towards the end I'll kind of make a comment about Holland and the Dutch. But again, these might be kids, but these are clearly adults, and they're not as big. I mean, look at all these men, all are a good stature. I believe this is our original stock. And whatever the parasitic stock is a different stature. In other words, the giants weren't some kind of, I mean, again, there are mentions of giants and different things saying that they're this or this, and from that, I feel, again, everybody has their narratives. My sense, and again, looking at the old architecture, the old cultures, the size, the enormity of it, it would, you would figure a general population of around this kind of stature. I mean, this guy actually looks a little small here because right behind him is another person of a similar stature. Again, everything is supposition and hypotheses. We're unpacking this together. We're pulling the threads out to make a new tapestry. Here's San Francisco again, 1871. San Francisco in 1900. This is kind of like, I mean, tell me that this doesn't look like as if suddenly a time warp opened up, and here's moderns, here's 1900 San Francisco, and then there's this. These are two. I mean, could it be any more stark that this culture is not this culture? And here they are, side by side. Look at the size of that ball up there. And of course, little statuary. I showed you that picture earlier. I'm not sure if that's another vantage point of this group or not. But you get the same kind of effect where you have this culture here, and you have this culture here, and you have this, and the signage. Ugh. The constant, give me your money, All right. So where's this? This is in South Africa, in Pietersmaritzburg City Hall, okay? So here we go. We just went from San Francisco to South Africa, and gee, don't things look kind of familiar? I mean, look at all the little domages on here. I mean, dome. These are all little capacitors. Dome. Look at that. And obviously, it says built in damaged by fire in 1895, rebuilt in 1901. Of course, they added this freaking clocks because you must be on time. I mean, again, this is Saturn Chronos energy. And boy, if I wanted to go full mythology on everybody's asses, it would get crazy. And so what I like about this, so here you have these capacitors, and here you have like two little domes. Boop, boop. Double-barreled shotgun of good energy for you. Little domage over here on these windows. See, little. You can see the light coming through here. It's not power in here, but here you can see that it's operative. These used to be portals, and of course, what were they doing? Well, all this energy that was being collected up here, and then up you can see, you can't see the full top. But you can, I mean, it even looks like the stupas in the stupas, S-T-U-P-P-A, that you see in Myanmar, which many people know as Burma, but Burma was the corruption of Myanmar. So, I mean, just look at this, and then look at this. Look again, no right angles here. See, notice once again. I'm just making my point. You see over here, rounded. Here it is into the street. No right angles. And then you come to this piece of crap, this Saturnian box garbage. I mean, look at those. They look like you can cut your vision looking at that crap. Look at this crap. It's crap. And there's a little obelisk down here. I can get real plugged in. I mean, I have genetic memories like we all can have, and that's what these pictures are about. To evoke who we were. This is St. Petersburg, by the way. And once again, look at this. On the corner, no right angle. No right angle to assault us as we go about our business. Over here, I can't quite make it out. Like, once again, but it's not out. It's not on the corner. It's not like where everybody's doing it. It's a little bit buried. It's not. They couldn't get rid of every single right angle, but you will see, especially where it matters, the minimization of right angles jutting into the public space. It was obviously something they took into consideration. So here you have this grand dome with supportive domes over here. Same kind of thing. You have these open spaces with the pillars for vorticing and ether collection. Same thing here. Another one back here. The signs of the mud flood. All right. If you notice down here, all these half buried windows again. All right. And then look at these streets. I mean, these streets, they're just kind of, you know, bleh. You can tell that the slop just came here. And so if I had to guess which way the water flowed, in this case, looking at this building, I'd say the water came from the left in this picture. Because once again, you can barely see the windows here, and then they start to get, and then as you move along, that you see more and more of them. Because it came from here, so this was the main place. I bet you the mud was like, you know, halfway up here. And they've cleared it down to this level. But you know, came here, and then as the water picks up speed and can carry more debris again, because it hit here, slammed, it slowed down, deposits its stuff, and then it starts picking up speed. As it picks up speed, it can carry more weight, and that's why there's less debris as it goes down here. Okay, so here's probably one of the best pictures of a star fort, and looks like a rather relatively well kept, if not relatively modern one. You can see this is, you know, you can see some ice around here, and right in the center of the formation is kind of like a, you could say, like a broadcast tower. Although this looks a little late, this does not. I'm not sure that this is original to it, because the architecture is very angular, and I don't necessarily see any antiquitech. So they might have just built it into here. But I've developed a little bit of a theory. And then over here, you see more of this. Now, the important thing is water attracts, everybody kind of knows, oh, remember you might have heard of negative ions. Oh, negative ions, good for you. They are good for you. And that's, if you can get them in the woods, and you can get them by water. So water is a natural negative ion generator or attractor, wherever it is, but where there's water, you have more negative ions. Salt water, even more so. So that's why whenever you see a lot of these buildings, you'll see very often, especially the ones with the massive domes, they're right on the waterfront, whether it's fresh or salt. Because that's where that increases the negative ions. And then they also always had like these walls that were clearly not battlement walls. Any dedicated person would have no problem. It seems to me the reason why there were walls around these is because as they collected the energy, and there was let's say kind of almost like an ambient, imagine almost like a cloud of negative ions that would blanket it, and just having a little bit of a wall, and the wall being a little bit taller than people, maybe twice as tall, helped to keep the energy contained. So that, and then also that same energy that was good for humans also enabled and really facilitated plant growth. So if you were in these contained areas and you had your gardens and whatever, the etheric energy would enhance growth and health of plants, health of humans. And so then I'm looking at these, and I'm wondering how might these work in concert with this. I was trying, and it eluded me until I looked at this picture. And part of what I am kind of seeing is, since the energy is accumulating, because in the original star forts they also had more generation in here in the forms of those capacitors. So if you're building up this generator, and then of course you're going to have an outflow. And so what I'm kind of seeing is, if you had an outflow of energy coming here, it might, this is actually focusing, let's call it the trickles that are coming out. You can't keep it all in, so it escapes. And it comes here. It seems to me this is a focal point where it focuses the energy as it's leaving. And I think, and then if you had the old tech where you had the one that was hungry for the electrons, as they get concentrated anew through these points, they would be able to come up again and feed in, almost like a magnet. So you'd have this come here. So as the energy's trickling out and it's refocused by the shape, and it's better for me to do it from the side. So the energy trickles out, gets focused here. So now it's not just so ambient. Now there's some electrons building, and in like in an original thing you would have had lots of those those capacitor hungry things. So as it comes out here and it's looking for something, it's going, wait a second, it's drawing me right here. So you'd have almost, I'm not saying it's a force field. No, I'm not saying it wouldn't be, but the whole idea of, so as as you're losing your energy, you pull it back in. You pull it back in, and you almost create an energy dome. Now, whether or not it's the kind of doming that would create a natural force field, I don't know. But how about a field of healthiness, of sanity in an insane world? So that's my little hypothesis of how these things might work. Again, this is a bad example. If we had one with the real tech in here, I think it would be more obvious how that would work, because you kind of have to use your imagination in my explanation. This appears to be a free tech invention. Now, this could be just a sketch, like somebody was dreaming up of. Now, whether or not this ever worked, I don't know, and I can't really read this writing. But when I was looking at it, because you can see, all right, so what you would do, it looks like here's a hand crank, so you would turn this, and then the gear thing would turn this. All right, so what I'm noticing, these look like feathers. Okay, if anybody knows about, so, and if you know about static electricity, feathers could, and they also have that focus point. If you know how feathers are, they all focus into the quill. Okay, so it looks to me like they have a group of feathers gathered, and as you cranked this machine, I think with this, and I don't think this was an enclosed device. I think the whole idea was to crank the machine. So this, like, let's say like a home device. Crank the machine, get these things going. They're picking up the electrons. So the electrons channel down into here, feed into this, and if you notice, each one of these terminates into one of these star points. And then there's also this stick in here, and I'm looking at them, and they actually show it. So I think that not only was the electricity able maybe to, once it's captured, you need to be able to kind of route it. So not only might it have gone here, but certainly I think would have gone into what this point was. But they put these weights in the feather that you can see here, okay? So as it goes up, once it gets into this position, the weight creates the feather to touch this outer rim. And so I feel like, there's a certain amount of static electricity that's going into the quills and being picked up and going through here, but just to get every last little drop out, he kind of had it. So after they do their little free form, and whatever energy didn't collect, again, think about static electricity, okay? And then when you make that contact point, so as they're collecting the static electricity, and this whole like half thing, and then they get here, this stick here makes the feathers drop, it contacts it and will release whatever energy has not been able to channel that way. Because you can see that, okay, this one's touching, this one's touching, this one's touching, but then it gets over here and it folds back, it folds back, it folds back. Then it comes up here, and whatever this stick is, and there seems to be a stick on both sides, one to compress, a little weight here to compress, and then a bigger weight. If you notice this, and again, look at the engineering. This stick is a little bit shorter, so it won't weigh as much as this stick. So, and you wouldn't want that, because you want this stick to outweigh it, so you can press it down here. That's it. Again, this is just, and whether it worked, again, this could be somebody's idea that they sketched out, and it didn't work at all. But I was looking at it, and I try to use a little bit of extrasensory perception, so to say, like what's going on here, and so that's the little what I came up with what this might have been. All right, where is this? Sydney Antiquitech again. All right, so did I? No, I guess I didn't. So this is again. There's a Sydney, and here would have been a portal that's now got a Chronos thing in it, and you see, it looks like they might have. I'm not sure. I can't tell whether that's there, but you still have the same energy gatherer. You still have the same, the passage for creating vortices and accumulating at the same time. You have these little things here with the little balls, which might have probably had some mercury in them. These might have each had a little bit of mercury in them. Then you have these. Here's more energy gathering. Here's a window. Here are portals. These portals look like they were closed up, because again, this is later on. This is obvious. I mean, when you see this piece of crap over here behind it, obviously the parasites are in town. So, they will I mean, once again, they might leave the Antiquitech in place, but yeah, we don't need to bother. Maybe they're even using it, but the last thing they're going to do is allow that good energy to kind of come out into the people and lessen their stress and take them out of that fear mode and allow them to actually think. And of course, these huge portals that would have been feeding it, they're filled up with clocks. You better check your time. Are you late? Are you late? Do you need to get somewhere? Do you need to get somewhere? I mean, again, ugh. This is also Sydney, and I like this because of the juxtaposition, and Barnaby liked it also. Of look, I mean, this is kind of like, let's call it Old Culture Row. I mean, look at the splendor. And of course, there's some, they actually left some of the statuary. And then over here, you can see the capacitors with their antennas, all the, like kind of like the little mini step-down capacitors. This would have originally corrected. This would have been a portal, broadcasting energy down the street for everybody. Again, more that same, you see the same motifs over and over again. And it's not just an architectural style, which it is, but it's form and function. Again, the reason we have these open spaces almost always with these is because this is where the ether, basically it starts as air. There's plenty of electrons in air to collect, but once you start creating the vortices, the bottom of the vortices suck. They kind of tap in. That's the 0 point. When that little vortex gets down to where it kind of just can't get any smaller, that's the 0 point. And then it taps into the what they call 0 point energy, which is why they call it. And it comes out. And then you have to have the apparatus that can collect what you're pulling out. And that's what this whole array here is. And then behind it you see the modern garbage. And again, if you notice, there's no right angle on this. Here's this huge thing, and they're not assaulting you with right angles. These buildings are all kind of flush to each other, so you don't have to worry about that. These little teeny like right angles up here or above street level, you really wouldn't be looking at them and feeling them. And as you get closer down, if you notice, there's almost no right angles. I mean, really, look at that. This is the Sydney Town Hall doorway, and what's good is they're trying to get an idea of what's behind the statuary. And so what I see, kind of, if you know anything about the Greek muses, I think we see a lot of that. But and the muse, and the amount of women that are in the old, I mean, women were revered. Why wouldn't they be? Where do you think the generations come from? I mean, yeah, we need the fellow, but I mean, imagine carrying around, a baby. I mean, especially in the late term pregnancy, and then the delivering. I mean, women are my heroine. They're just amazing. And when they're allowed to be who they really are, they're amazing. When you start corrupting them and start telling them they're second-class citizens, and and all the other stuff that kind of came in with more modern, we'll call them more modern ideologies in the place of women, then of course you'll get a reaction, and it won't be a pretty reaction. But they've dumbed down everybody. But here we see the celebration of women, and so if I look at her, she seems to be part of astronomy, and you could say you see the gears. So this is kind of like science. And then if we see over here, we see a ship, an anchor, kegs. So my guess is science, the arts, and mercantilism, because you want good trade. And so you see that nice balance. You're not just a bunch of nerds. You have everything you need. You have the science, you have the arts, whatever, and you also have getting stuff around. And then of course this beautiful arch. And him. You can be wherever you want. Here's more Mudflood. This is that same hall. I think that's the same hallway. But as you can see, here's what's now the ground level, and this stairway. This would have been ground level once upon a time. I clipped this picture just so I could focus it. But all these windows here are again half cut off because they were buried in a flood that resulted in lots of mud being dumped on them, and many people are using the term mud flood. I think for some people coming into this, the reason I want to break up that term, because when they think of a mud flood, and there can be mud floods, there are lahars, any flash floods in the desert are full of debris and could be, again, the term mud flood is not wrong. But I still think that much of the mud that was deposited, if we saw it in action, would have just looked like an inundation of what would look like water, endless debris, trees floating. It would have been a mess. But it would have looked like a flood, and carrying tons and tons and tons of soil, sediment, and clay. And the moment that rushing water hits anything that stops it, it drops. It drops what it's carrying. It can't carry it. The velocity's not there. This is also this. Oh, this was pretty interesting. This is that same one. So So they're up here, and this is interesting. These two fellows. This looks, when I look at it closer, I clip this. This looks to be, and if you look at the facial features, this looks like an Aborigine to me. This looks like an Australian Aborigine, and this looks like one of the new kind of like farmer type people. And once again, agriculture was very important to the old culture. So I'm guessing this is an old culture, non-indigenous person. Yeah. And I don't know what this is, but there is a nice smiley face sun coming up over here. But okay, so here's the interesting thing about the dating. Okay, over here it says AD. All right, so that tells us what side of that marker we're on. And then it says over here what looks to be, I mean, it does say 1888. Let's just take a little closer look at this. I can't lose too much resolution. See how these 8s all have a certain look to them? Look at this 1. It's not rounded, it's squared. If you can see here, these are rounded, and they're also more aged. And then you come over here, this is very angular, and it's not as aged. They added the 1. Whatever this originally said, and of course the timeline's been changed, Gregorian calendar, so who knows what AD 888 meant to them or what that was on a calendar. But it's very clear to me that this originally read AD 888, and then you can see that this thing was kind of added on here. I mean, that 1 is got sharp edges. These 8s are rounded. When you look at the detail here, I mean, and it's got a different color. These almost have a patina, an aged patina. This is relatively new. But of course, from the street level, you might not see that. But even if we get out, you can see it a little better. So again, the endless fuckery of the parasites. And I'm not apologizing for my language because I speak to adults. And if and I was a kid too, and I don't play that game. The game doesn't work for me. And I don't use the words much, so when I use them, they work. This is interesting. It's an advertisement for a party. High society. Madam Anna Bishop, encouraged by the great success attending her previous concerts, blah blah blah. Okay, we'll get. She's going to do grand mythical. It's about play. What is she going to do? She will sustain 7 distinct characters in appropriate costume and sing in 6 different languages. V's, or example of, Russian, German, English, French, Tartarian, and Italian, comprising the most brilliant gems of popular operas. Okay, so usually if you're going to sing in languages, you're going to sing in languages that a lot of people will understand. Russian, German, English, French, Tartarian, and Italian. Interesting, isn't it? Le Grand Continent. Okay, this is the Tartary map. Okay, just in case anybody's mind, well, what are you doing about all this Tartary crap? All right. So here's Tartary. All right. Here's Grand Tartary. And when is this? This is 1634. And I do find it interesting. I mean, again, I think Tartary is a name that developed once after Genghis Khan and his Tatar people, or Tatar. The real word is Tatar, T-A-T-A-R. If you look it up, you'll see that either one, it's the same word. One has an R, one doesn't have an R, it's the same word. I remember my mother told me that we had Tatar blood, not Tartar, but Tatar. So anyway, so here's, apparently there was a desert, or dry area, so here it says Tartary Desert. Here's Muscovy. This is where, this is where Moscow got its name. This is where St. Petersburg would be, and all the rest. Here's Norway. Here's Sweden. Here's Finland. All the weather, or here, I guess, again, the lines have changed, just like you don't see Grand Tartary. Here's where Finland would be. Finland and the Sami, the real native, the indigenous Finns are the Sami people. And on some other maps, when you look at this area, it'll actually say Samo on it. They were the indigenous people, the reindeer herders, So anyway, so here's Muscovy, and here's the Tartary Desert. Here's Grand Tartary. Here you have again the Mer de la Tartary. It's Mer de la Tartary until the 1700s, and that's when suddenly it becomes the Glacial Sea or something. Araby, okay, India, and here again is Africa. And now these are all the mountain ranges, but you can still see rivers all over the place. My guess is it's probably getting a little dry, but not. It's still basically not. Once again, it's that right little bit in the middle. Remember from earlier in Libya, they had a little bit in the middle in the desert, but the rest of it's got all rivers and mountains and whatever. So Grand Tartary, and a little commentary on Africa. This was interesting. Also, originally, Australia was New Holland, which brings us up to the Dutch. Don't forget the original name of New York, which indicates English. The original name of New York was New Amsterdam. Amsterdam was part of Holland, not the Netherlands. And at that time, Amsterdam was not Holland was not a monarchy. It was a free republic. And there's a few hints there for everybody just to kind of play with. And then Captain Cook comes by and sees things, and they start claiming it for the Queen. So although originally it was all New Holland, the encroachment becomes with New South Wales. Interesting enough, what's this island now? Oh, well, we should all know this as Tasmania, because Tasman, this man Tasman, another person working for the parasites, discovered it. But originally, what was its name? Van Diemen's Island. And people go, oh, it sounds like demon. Oh, okay, I understand, but whatever. It's Dutch. Before it was Tasmania, named for this Tasman person working for the crown, originally it was named after the Dutch who settled. And I'm starting to guess, where do we find fantastic buildings just like that? In New York was originally New Amsterdam. I'm starting to get a little bit of a Dutch old culture connection. Not that they were the old culture, but they were a portion of it. Like, in other words, they might have been the last European holdouts when everything was starting to change and all the monarchies. I mean, you had the various petty kingdoms. Germany wasn't a nation until, I think, the 1800s. Until then, it was probably had all kinds of old culture, free republics with their own sovereign. And why would he be a sovereign? Because he and his queen contributed DNA to large parts of the population. Just like a queen bee, all the bees in the hive are her children. That's why she's the queen, not because she's this, has some kind of power, because she actually created them. She's part of their genetics. Interesting thing about a hive, if you take the queen out of the hive, as long as you keep the queen alive, you could take her all over the world. If you don't keep her alive, your hive functions. If she suddenly dies, if she's down the street or on the other side, or on another place on the plane, I don't care. I mean, once again, I realize some of my terms might upset, and I don't want to upset anybody. I want to keep us all on board here. So no matter where you take the queen on the earth, as long as she is alive, her hive will be fine. If you kill her any place on the earth, the hive will fall apart. Quantum entanglement. This is Vienna. Okay, and this is Vienna when it was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And of course, who showed me this? Barnabas Nagy showed this. He's Hungarian. I mean, again, look at this architecture. Boom. I mean, look at this. But the other interesting thing about this area is how young all the trees are. And we can't kind of get close enough, but I bet if we got close enough, we would see. Matter of fact, I'm not going to make. One of the things I'm not going to do is go wildly speculate. I will indulge in hypothesis and supposition, but wild speculation, not really what I want to do. But I have a feeling if we could look closer, we would see signs of. I'll just call it mud flood because of the mud accumulation from the floods. This is a close-up picture of. This is in Cambodia, if I recall correctly, and. Now let's look at this. This is the kind of light you get when you can collect the etheric energy, and you can see the wires. So you can see the wires running from point to point. You can see them running down from the top here, and this is producing light. and I don't even think this thing is even necessarily fully hooked up. The original video I watched, they had this really wild, beautiful sound that it made. Matter of fact, the main note was F sharp, and I happened to tune in 432 because I believe that because of the sacred geometry of it. I won't go over, but the F sharp, I identified that the note being made was in 432 because when I grabbed my guitar and I went to find the note, and my guitar is tuned in 432, the F sharp that I was hearing in the video was the same F sharp on my guitar. So, and if you do all the platonic solids, they come out to an F sharp major note. Or, you know, if you take all the add up all the angles of the frequencies and then turn it and find what frequencies they go to, there's only 3 notes that any of the platonic solids will generate: an F sharp, a C sharp, and an A sharp. And if you, in music theory, that would create an F sharp major chord. C sharp would be what's known as the 5th. You know, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Well, the 1 and and that's like, you know, that's 8 notes. Well, the 1, the 3, and the 5 make what we know as a common chord. Anyway, I don't want to get too geeky on you guys. This is why did I call this a wild? I wrote this as a wild map of the world. You know, I name these things. But I guess until I figure out why I named it that, I can just show again these colorations of, you know, here's the whole Tartarian area, and then you see basically all of South America is colored the same as that. Looks like what might be Greenland or Newfoundland has a similar color. Here on this is the end, you know, this is the most eastern part of Asia, and here you see it. So you can see that color here. And what is this? Do I have a date? I didn't write a date on this, so you might not have got it. But I wonder why I called this a wild map. Why did you do that, Radagast? Land van de Eendracht. Now this, at this point, they hadn't discovered supposedly Australia or Antarctica, so they kind of, but they saw the northern part, so they would kind of do this, and they put it all into one piece. Once again, I understand that this is representing, again, this is certain people represent Earth one way, represent Earth the other way. The fact is, the problem we have, the parasites we have, the lies being told by the people happen on the Earth, and of whatever shape it is. And again, I'm not attached at all to it. But I want to commend the flat earthers for perceiving that they've been lied to about the shape of the Earth, and then they went looking for other stuff. They didn't just sit in one place and just, you know, oh, flat Earth, flat Earth, flat Earth. They went like, okay, they're lying to us about the shape of the Earth. What else are they lying to about? And now we have this whole Tartarian and different, you know, Tartaria, the old culture, and all this stuff is breaking out. And it's because, really, I mean, Sylvia Ivanova has been doing it for years, but you can't just have one person with and then you have people, oh, I don't like your accent, I have trouble understanding English. And so to me, especially if you're a native English speaker, it's like maybe if you were more familiar with the language you speak, you wouldn't have a problem hearing it through somebody's accent, because I have no problem. I mean, every once in a while the word will pass me, but you know, within a moment I go, oh, she's sounding our vowel that way, or she's rounding our consonant that way. I know, you know, I know English, so if somebody bends it a little bit, it might take me a second to get it. And then once you've got kind of like the reprogramming of, oh, she says that word this way, the next time she uses it, you recognize it. So, but anyway, she wasn't getting the traction, and it is the flat Earth community that has really created this stir, and it is all good. It is all good. And like I said, and they're really, I mean, they just like you'll hear little leakages of maybe some of my cosmology or whatever, but it's not my focus. And people, you know, people like Martin Leakey, occasionally go off on a rant, whatever. I don't care. He's bringing all this research. I love him. I love him. I love him. Okay? This, wow. Okay, I think I'm going to close with this one. And I said something that looks like it would be out of Star Trek. Look at this design. Now, this is interesting because usually we're looking at it and we rarely get to see what one of these buildings might look like from the ground looking up. Well, now we do. At least one of them. I mean, look at the beauty of it. Again, rounded, and even sometimes where they look like right angles, when you look at this here, you can kind of see this flared out. All you have to do is either make this a little bit more of an obtuse angle. Obtuse is greater than 90 degrees, or a little bit of acute, which is less than 90 degrees. Whether you go a little bit more or a little bit less, you still eliminate that 90-degree knife. And yes, so I'll come back on camera and say hello to everybody, say goodbye to everybody. So anyway, this is my new kind of tack I'm taking, which is addressing the old culture. I mean, I will put Tartaria in there because this I have to use kind of the words people will know. If I could, it's one thing for me to redefine it in a way that makes sense, but doesn't. I could be, making as much sense as I want. If nobody knows what I'm talking about, then that doesn't make sense. Wouldn't make sense to make sense. And it's not that the other terms don't make sense. They make plenty of sense. I just feel there's a little more clarity, and especially for people, the normies, let's call it, or the people who are waking up, to use a terminology that kind of go, oh wow, yeah. I mean, you say there were mud floods. They're like, what kind of stupidity is that? Okay, I mean, you guys must have run into it, all right? But if you're saying there were these massive floods that lasted for days or a week or a month or whatever, and they were just carrying untold amounts of sediment. And of course, they dropped the sediment whenever they ran into buildings. And when everything dried up, everything was just covered and buried in mud. And then they'll go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Wow, I never heard of that. Where, of course, if they go, mud flood, and then they go search for it, and the only people they find is a bunch of YouTubers talking about it. They go, oh, another conspiracy to mud flood. No, there were real cataclysmic, horrible, paradigm-shattering floods, and they carried enormous amounts of earth, debris, and sediment with it, and deposited them around everything they could, burying things in meters and meters of mud. So anyway, that'll be so that's it. I haven't figured out exactly how I'm going to title this. I'm used to doing live streams and thinking of the title beforehand, but since I'm going to and I might once in a while do a live stream, but I really don't want to know that there's another conversation going on while I'm having, and I just to me I just think it helps, especially with me being a little bit of a geek, a little bit of a nerd. How about a nerd? And this stuff, I mean, I really am trying to communicate, and I just feel it's a lot easier to communicate when there's only one communication happening at a time, as opposed to a live stream where there's a few communications happening at a time. And then of course there's always people who are just bored, or they want to be, chat superstars, and I've noticed much less of that in the truther community. Less of it than some of the communities. But so anyway, that'll be it for me. Again, I'm Radagast. My YouTube channel is ModWiz125. Sending out love, and let's have our Earth back. Let's have sanity, love, and this Earth was meant to be a paradise for us. All right, so we just have to we have to do something about the problem. And the first part of anything is recognizing one has a problem, and then we can start the 12 steps to get rid of parasites. All right, thank you all. Hope that I'm not going to be as prolific as others, but I do have things to say. Thank you. Take care of yourselves.